we're going to talk about miracles. That's our focus. Obviously, we're going to be talking about miracles that took place in Israel over the last year, but we're going to expand upon that and talk about miracles in general as well. I don't think that I will conclude the subject of miracles this week, so it may be a continuation to next week. We'll find out soon. We'll see how. So if we look back at the last 2 years and 2 months, we see many high points and low points, some triumphant moments as well as some distressing ones. But the one thing we can say for certain is that we're living in historic times. Things are happening that we haven't seen before. And I believe that these last 2 years will be talked about by our children, by our grandchildren, by our great-grandchildren, as we talk about the 6-Day War. As we talk about the miracles that took place there, they will talk about what took place in Israel from October 7th till today. There was a great rabbi, his name was Rabbi Beryl Wine, who passed away recently, a great author, and he shared a story of a Jewish cadet who a number of years ago attended the West Point Military Academy. And they were taking a course at the academy on modern day warfare. And to do in that course, they would focus on many of the conflicts of modern day history to see what we can learn from them. Vietnam was a big part of the course, the Korean War, Russia's invasion into Afghanistan, Grenada, if you remember that particular war. They studied the wars, they analyzed it, what went right, what went wrong. And the purpose of this course is what lessons can we learn for future wars. But this cadet kept on wondering, week after week after week, the instructor is getting up, and he's talking about another war and another war. Not a single one was about Israel. And of all, he was saying, the 6-Day War has so much to study about, so much to learn from, one of the most amazing wars of modern day history, and is being ignored. And he's wondering, is there something here? Why are they not talking about Israel? Is it that they don't like Israel? What's the reason? And finally, he had the courage to ask his instructor after class, could you explain to me, you've spoken about Vietnam, you've spoken about the Korean War, you've spoken about Grenada, you've spoken about Afghanistan, you've spoken about Iraq. Why not the 6-Day War? So he said, all the wars that we talk about here are wars that follow the normal patterns of armed conflict. At West Point, we study strategy, we study tactics. We don't study miracles. We can't discuss 6-Day War because it's beyond any comprehension. There's nothing I can teach. It doesn't make sense how a small little sliver of a country can defeat all these powerful countries armed by the Soviet Union in 6 days. It doesn't happen. Wars take time, months, years. 6 days, miracles. It's hard to talk about Israel these days without invoking that word. Because let's face it, the very existence of Israel, the very existence of the Jewish people is nothing short of a miracle. So what is a miracle? So I want to take you to a biblical story. Some of you may be familiar with the story. It's the story of the 12 spies. Okay? The Jewish people come out of Egypt. They go through the splitting of the sea. They go through the Sinai revelation. They're getting ready to enter the land of Israel. That was the plan. Take them out of Egypt, Sinai, Israel, which was called the land of Canaan. Well, they decide that they want to send spies into the land of Canaan to find the strategic places which are fortified, which cities are fortified, which cities are weaker. If you're going to have a battle, if you're going to have a war, we need to send spies to get intelligence. So Moses selects 12 spies. Why the number 12? The number 12 keeps repeating itself in the Torah. 12 tribes. One spy from each tribe. But he selects the leaders of each tribe. When I say leader, not just political leader, but spiritual leader. He selects 12 great individuals. And these 12 are sent with the instructions to go into the land of Canaan, disguised as Canaanites, and come back with a report where would be the strategic points of entry. Where should we enter? From which city should we go in? Well, if you're familiar with the story, this story backfires terribly. Because upon returning from their mission, 10 out of the 12 gave a very gloomy report warning the people that there's no way that we can defeat such formidable enemies. The entire camp breaks into panic. They protested that they no longer wanted to go into the promised land. Why did you ever take us out of Egypt? We were better off in Egypt, they say to Moses. Why did you bring us here now to wage war against the Canaanites and to die by the sword? And the tragic result of this episode, this story that I just shared with you, the story of the spies, leads to an entire generation that will not merit to enter the land of Israel. God says, you're protesting, you don't want to go? Don't go. You'll stay in the wilderness. And that's why we wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. 40 years we wandered because we rebelled. Only their children and their grandchildren would enter the land, but not the adults. All the commentaries ask this question: how is it possible that this story happened? How could it happen? Remember, who were these 10? They were faithful people. They were honorable leaders of Israel. More so, they witnessed the 10 plagues. They were there just a few months ago in Egypt when all the water turned to blood, when millions of frogs suddenly appeared. All of the 10 plagues that we speak about when it comes to the Passover Seder, and we study about in the book of Exodus, they were there. They didn't watch it in the movie The Exodus. They were there. It happened in front of their eyes. They're used to seeing miracles. They saw it. And then when they get to the sea and they panic because the Egyptian army is coming after them and the sea splits for them, they were there. Not at Universal Studios when they used to have the splitting of the sea. They walked through the waters. And then they arrive at Sinai and they hear the voice of God talking to them. They experienced this. And they were holy people. They were leaders of a tribe. So how are we possibly going to accept that these 10 people who witnessed so much, who was at the scene, who were leaders of each tribe, would rebel in such a way and say, we will never be able to defeat them? How could you say never? And how did you defeat the Egyptians? Did you defeat the Egyptians? God was there for you. Did you split the sea? God did it for you. If God is telling you onwards to the promised land, onwards to the promised land. Instead, they say they're stronger than us. Yeah, they may be stronger than you, but are they stronger than God? The very God that was commanding them to enter the land, the very God with the flawless track record of miraculous deliverance that they participated in, that they benefited from, where were they coming from? That's the question of just about every commentator that looks into this story to say, how do we make sense of it? So I want to share with you, and every commentary has an answer. They're all great answers. I want to share with you the answer that the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, gave on this question. And he said, because it fits into the subject we're talking about, he said, up until this point, the miracles that the Israelites and these 10 had witnessed were instances where God disrupted nature. Okay, he interfered in nature. Water turned into blood. That's not natural. Fire mixed with ice. That's not natural. Daylight became darkness in the plague of darkness. The sea transformed into solid walls of water. Food fell from the sky. All of these things are not natural. In each case, God was playing by the rules. He was not playing by the rules of his own game. He created a world with nature, and he decides he's going to change it. He was suspending the laws of nature for the miracles that he was performing. But the people also knew Not all of this would last up until they enter the land of Israel, but once they would enter the land of Israel, now things are going to be different. There's no more Superman-style tricks. They would have to fight their own wars as mortal beings. Food won't fall from heaven. They're going to have to find the food, bake the food, cook the food, serve the food. And if a neighbor was going to attack, they would have to defend the land with mortal powers, with their own strength. They'd have to plow, to plant, to sow. They would have to be involved. They would raise their families by the sweat of their brows, using nature. No more manna from heaven being served for them. And so they panicked. All along you told us God's going to take us out of Egypt, and He performed miracles. It was great. We watched it. We applauded. It was wonderful. But now you're telling us all of this is going to end when we leave the wilderness, when we enter the land of Israel. When we enter the land of Israel, we're going to have to fight these armies. We're a bunch of slaves. For 210 years we've been slaves. What do we know about battle? What do we know about war? What do we know about victory? We can't defeat them. They're fortified. These are fortified cities with trained armies. So the moment you took away the supernatural element, they panicked. That's where these 10 spies were coming from. Now, had they had a private conference with Moses before they spoke up to the public, we would have had a happier ending. Had they come back and they said, Moses, we want to talk to you first. We don't want to just give out the report. We want to have a chat with you. And they would express their concern. The land is indeed beautiful. It's indeed flowing with milk and honey. Look at the beautiful fruits. All of that is true. But Moses, if we have to fight this war, we can't do it. They're fortified. They're strong. They've got powerful armies. Moses would have explained to them that yes, there's a God that suspends nature, but that same God could perform miracles within nature. You will go out in the battlefield and He will bless your efforts and you will be victorious. Moses would have been able to explain this to them, but they didn't have the powwow with Moses. They went right to the people to saying, we can't. We'll never be able to survive this. Now, if you know a little bit of the rest of the story, 40 years later, when Joshua will lead them, their entry into the land of Israel, that first battle indeed had supernatural miracles. If you know the story about the entry into the land of Jericho, they circled the wall for 7 days and then the wall collapsed. The sun suspended and they were able to fight on longer. Supernatural miracles still happened, but once they entered the land and settled the land, they were right. For the most part, those supernatural miracles, the Egypt plagues like, the splitting of the sea like, most of our miracles that we have experienced since are the ones dressed in nature. That brings the challenge to us. Do you recognize them? Do you say, nah, that's just natural? Or do you see the hand of God? Miracles were always part of our story. Miracles were always accessible to us, mostly within natural events. But to bring forth these miracles within nature, it requires our participation. We need to be a part of it. We need to put the effort in, naturally. If it means warfare, train for an army. Come up with a strategy. Fight on the battlefield. God will be with you. You'll see miracles will happen for you. For us that are not on the battlefield, but Israel's in battle, it means doing another good deed. Having your prayer to God to say, please, intercede, help our brothers, help our sisters. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to better myself. I'm going to be kinder. I'm going to be more charitable, more giving. That's our role, to bring down the energy for the miracle to happen. Let's rewind the clock a little bit. 1991. Again, the Lubavitcher Rebbe delivers a major address, and he's speaking about two extraordinary historical events of that period of time. Number one, let's refresh your memory to 1991, what was taking place in the world. The first was the fall of communism. The communist dictators of the Eastern Bloc were falling day by day. If I would have told you in 1980 that the communist regime of the Soviet Union and the Soviet bloc would no longer be in 1991, what would you have told me in 1980 took place in order for that to come to be? Every one of our minds, we were thinking 1980, nuclear war. It's going to happen, right? They're going to elect Reagan and there's going to be a nuclear war because he's this wild cowboy. That's what's going to happen. Him and Brezhnev are going to go at it, and there's going to be we don't know who's going to survive, if any nation was going to survive. But in order for the Soviet Union to collapse, it's obviously going to take a major world war. So if I told you in 1980 that the Soviet Union would collapse, the Eastern Bloc would collapse, the Berlin Wall would come down, East Germany and West Germany would be able to be a democratic country. If I told you that Poland would fall, then Romania, and I would go list country by country, and I told you this in 1980, and I said all of this would happen, what would you have said to me?
You're crazy.
You would say, how many millions got killed in this war? There's a war going on today between Ukraine and Russia. The death toll between both sides has reached 1 million people. It just goes on and on and on. That's just 2 countries. What if I told you all these countries would fall? And then if I had said to you in 1980, and I would have said, and guess what? There will not be a single gunshot fired. There will not be a single tank that would roll into one city. There will not be a single Air Force plane in the sky, and yet all of this would happen. What would you have said to me, be honest, in 1980 if I was saying that to you? You would say that's the likes of a miracle of the 10 plagues and the splitting of the sea. That would take a supernatural miracle. And yet it happened before all of our eyes. We watched the news and we heard what was going on. One night this country fell. The next night this country fell. One after the next, and these dictators were running for their lives. Just by people standing and demonstrating. Just people. No guns, no tanks, not even a coup, just people gathering together and saying enough. And it was over. The Lubavitcher Rebbe spoke the words kind of what I just said to you. And he said, and yet people ask, how come miracles don't happen today? They are happening. The question is, are you opening your eyes? The second point he made was the Gulf War. If you remember, there was a Saddam Hussein. And Saddam Hussein is involved in the war because he invades Kuwait. And the whole world unites against him. So what does he do? He's facing the whole world to come after him. He does what every one of these evil tyrants do. He sends missiles into Israel. That's what he did. You remember this? He sends Scud missiles into Israel. He wants to draw Israel into this war, because if he draws Israel into this war, then the Arab nations are not going to know whose team are they on. Right? He wants to unite the Arabs to be with him, so he's the leader of the Arab world because he's sending missiles into Israel. He sends Scud missile after Scud missile after Scud missile. Now, before you think that these Scud missiles don't do any damage, he used these same Scud missiles in his war with Iran, which went on for many, many years. And he killed thousands of people with these same missiles. And he sends them all into Israel. And not a single person was harmed by any of these Scud missiles. Miracle or nature? Bad luck? Bad aim, or God's protective arms protecting Israel? That choice is yours to make. Do miracles happen? They happen. The question is, do we recognize them? Do we open our eyes? That's 1991. Let's get closer to our times. Some of this I mentioned briefly in one of the first week or the second week that we were together. I'll go over some of it now. Since October 7th, the soul of the Jewish nation has been in a heightened state of tension and alert. We have not recovered from the trauma of the evil perpetuated against our people, and I don't know that we will ever recover from that trauma. But this much I do know, we will emerge stronger for it, and we are seeing that already. Israel is a stronger nation today than it was on October 6th. Israel's borders are more secure today than they were on October the 6th. Now you might say that the process began in earnest, this process of changing the tide, turning the tide from defeatism, of feeling so defeated, to taking the upper hand. You can pinpoint the date. It was in the spring of 2024, and suddenly we felt something has changed. Israel began assuming a new offensive posture against her enemies, not asking for the permission of the world, but doing what needed to be done. It struck directly at the head of the snake with the bombing of the Iranian embassy in Syria. You remember that? That was the first bold move of, you generally don't attack embassies. You don't attack embassies in a country, right, that you're not at war with. And yet Israel went in and said, Iran, you're the one that's doing all of this. You're the ones behind all of this. And they went after the Iranian embassy in Syria. That embassy at that time was filled with key Iranian military advisors and commanders. And obviously the Mossad knew exactly who was in the embassy at exactly what time. Then came, if you recall, the assassination of the political head of Hamas. Where was the political head of Hamas situated when he was taken out? Anyone remember? Yes. Where was he? He was in Tehran. He was visiting Tehran. And they bombed the room that he was in. How could they bomb the room that he was in? Wouldn't there be security? They planted the bomb months before, knowing that whenever he does go to Iran, that's the room he stays in. And they took him out, and the world started realizing Israel is changing its posture. And then they started systematically eliminating the world's most notorious terrorist leaders. They started targeting one after the next. Nasrallah went down, Sinwar went down, Deif went down, and countless others. They literally started checking them off, one after the next. Wherever they were hiding in the world, the Mossad and the IDF were getting to them. And then you remember this day when the beepers went off, right? That was years in the making, years in the making. Unbelievable. Where these Hezbollah terrorists were taken off the battlefield, all hospitalized with serious injuries. And suddenly the northern border is becoming more secure because all of these terrorists are either in a hospital somewhere or afraid of what will come next. And then Syria falls. Assad falls. Hezbollah in Lebanon says, cease fire. The missiles stop coming in from the north, although it's starting to flare up a bit these days. Now, Iran retaliates in 2024. So this is before the more recent attack with Iran. Iran retaliates in April and again in October of 2024. Iran didn't launch Scud missiles at Israel. They launched 500 long-range missiles with the ability to wipe out full blocks of Israel. And yet, most were intercepted. A few got through, and those that got through landed in sand, in water, and in empty spaces. These are precision-guided missiles. They're aimed at a tiny, densely populated country, and yet any missile that got through landed in an empty space. In that first two waves of Iran attacking Israel, not a single person was injured or killed. 500 missiles, not one. This doesn't happen. This is what the guy in West Point is saying. We can't study that because we can't reenact that. That doesn't happen in war. In 500 missiles, you're gonna have death. There will be death, and yet it's a chance you have to take because it's war. So how did it happen? Open your eyes. How did the Soviet Union collapse? It's a miracle, but you need to recognize it because it's shaped in nature. In responding to those attacks, Israel decided to do a little housekeeping. All right, you're coming into our territory. We're flying back over Iran. Again, this is still 2024. So they sent the IDF Air Force into Iran. And what did they target? No people. they target the Iranians' radar and defense systems because they had a plan. Israel knew what it eventually would want to do. And they used this opportunity to fly into Iran to take out strategic radars that they knew they would need in some future attack. And that attack came more recently on June 13th, 2025. So we're moving our calendar pretty close to now, and it was called Operation Rising Lion. Just took place right before the summer. And that mission stunned the military experts and inspired people all over the world that Israel took that preemptive strike to finally destroy Iran's nuclear capability. For how long were we talking about it? For how long were we negotiating with these guys? Over and over, and finally Israel said, enough. The Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency, which had been operating in Iran for years. They attacked with drones from within the country. Again, unheard of. Literally having a base in Iran, they had their drones and they're attacking places in Iran using drones while situated in Iran itself. Iran's air defense systems was decimated from 2024. So Israel's Air Force was able to operate with impunity, flying more than 1,000 miles to relentlessly pound missile sites, attack nuclear facilities, and eliminated Iranian nuclear scientists and military leaders. They were refueling in the skies over Iran with no fear of attack because the Iranians' radar system was knocked out months earlier. In the words of United States National Security Analyst John Spencer, this operation was not just historic, it was transformational. Those that study wars know what they saw, and what they saw is not something you normally see in war. Israel laid the groundwork in those 12 days. On June 22nd, the United States delivered the finishing blows with what they called Operation Midnight Hammer, and the combined strikes between Israel and the United States dealt this blow, hopefully a total collapse, to the Iranian vision of having nuclear weapons. So I want to go a little behind the scenes with you. To fully appreciate Operation Rising Lion, I want to go back again. We're going back and forth in time. Let's go to 1981 right now. I'm going to bring it back to 2025 soon. For now, the year is 81. Who's the Prime Minister of Israel 1981? Menachem Begin. Menachem Begin makes the bold decision to take out Saddam Hussein's nuclear reactor in Iraq. When making his case for the attack to the Knesset, this is what Begin said. I'm quoting him. He said it in Hebrew. I'm giving you the loose translation. I see before my eyes my two young nephews who were murdered in the Holocaust. And I see before my eyes the children of Israel today. Back then it was gas, now it's radioactive poison. At the time, Israel's action was condemned by literally the entire world. When we woke up and heard what happened, we applauded, and the world condemned Israel. Not only the typical United Nations, the United States as well condemned Israel, voted in the United Nations to condemn Israel for this attack. Begin's response, when he was told that the United Nations just voted to condemn you, he said, if this resolution is passed in the United Nations, and even if America votes in favor of it, we will survive. But if that reactor had survived, then we would not.
Bingo.
I'm comfortable with my decision. Let the world condemn. We're safer today than we were yesterday. 10 years later, 1991, when Saddam Hussein rained missiles on Israel's population center, the world finally realized how right Israel had been all along. Because had Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons during that war against Kuwait. He would have used it against Israel. He would have used it against Kuwait. He would have used it against Saudi Arabia because he was going down. And then Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney, who just passed away a few weeks ago, he sends a letter of gratitude to Israel on behalf of the United States of America, thanking Israel for what you did in 1981. The letter is written as a letter of gratitude, but really it should have been a letter of apology that we condemned you for what you did to survive. So do you want to know where Menachem Begin was when he announced to the world what Israel had done? We know secret cabinet meetings took place, but when Begin went public to let the world know that the Air Force is now on its way back from Iran and mission accomplished, where was he standing at the time? He actually was at the Western Wall. He was scheduled to be at the Western Wall because he was speaking, that day was scheduled for him to speak to a gathering of Holocaust survivors who had flown into Israel from all over the world for this very large reunion. Some of them had not seen family members since the end of the war. Some of them didn't even know that they had family members alive. So they worked for years on this to make this grand reunion of relatives that didn't know of each other's existence taking place at the Western Wall, and that's the day that as Begin is addressing this forum of Holocaust survivors that he lets the world know what Israel had just done. I quote from Begin's talk. If anyone rises and declares their intention to destroy the Jewish people, Israel will act. We will not wait for the world to catch up. We will defend ourselves first. That's what never again truly means. This is what he's saying at the Western Wall to Holocaust survivors. 44 years later, a similar statement would be made by the current Prime Minister of Israel when he launched Operation Rising Lion. I quote Netanyahu, "We have internalized the lessons of history. When an enemy says he intends to destroy you, believe him. When that enemy develops the capabilities to do so, stop him." And that's what we did. There are no words that can describe the boundless gratitude we all feel towards the modern-day Maccabees of the IDF. Every single one of us, to express that gratitude. We had this lecture last Monday night on the modern-day Maccabees of the IDF. These are heroic soldiers and pilots and sailors and intelligence agents. How do we begin to fathom the self-sacrifice of the Mossad agents who have been living undercover in Iran, perhaps for years, perhaps for decades, living under fake names, living fake lives, knowing that one day they will be called upon to defend their land of Israel? For years they have forfeited their Jewish identity, forfeited their way of life, doing so to protect Am Yisrael, the nation of Israel, under the most dangerous conditions imaginable. Now, we have no idea how many Mossad agents currently are still operating in Iran. But I'll tell you this, a couple of years ago, Iran had a president. Remember it was Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Remember him?
Yes.
Okay. He said during an interview that the regime has formed a special counterintelligence unit for the express purpose of identifying and weeding out Israeli agents operating in Iran. That the regime is aware that Mossad has infiltrated their military, and now they are forming a separate unit of the military for the sole purpose of weeding them out, finding them, and executing them. This is Ahmadinejad in an interview. You can find it on Google. It was only years later that they discovered that the general selected that headed up that unit was himself a Mossad operative. And 20 others that he hired to be part of this, were all Mossad agents. You can't make this stuff up. If you wrote the script and presented it to Hollywood, they would say it's too not believable. Nature or miracles? You decide. You know, when we open the ark, before we take out the Torah, we sing this verse from the book of Numbers. Vayehi ben Aharon, Vayomer Moshe. Sound familiar to you? Yes. Okay. We say, Kuma Hashem v'yafutzu eivecha v'yanusu misanecha mipanecha. Whenever the ark was about to set out, Moses would say, Arise, O Lord, and your enemies will be dispersed and your foes will flee before you. That's what we say when we open the ark. Who are God's enemies that we're referencing to? The commentaries say, anyone who hates the Jewish people, anyone who hates Israel, hates the creator of the universe. If you hate the chosen people and you hate Israel, then God says, then you're my enemy. Iran targeted the Jewish people, and in so doing, they targeted our Father in heaven. And like Haman before them, Iran started up with the wrong guy. When the ark sets out, meaning is when the faith of the Jewish people lead the way. When the Torah leads the way. When we're proud of who we are. When we're devoted to our Judaism, God then promises, I will help you defeat your enemies. We create the miracle. It's our doing. When the cabinet meeting in Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, they opened that meeting and they closed that meeting with a prayer. Because they recognize we need God. This is not just going to be military. We need help from above. When the prime minister, the commander-in-chief of the Israeli military, goes to the Western Wall and prays before the launching of the attack, that means the ark is leading the way. That he gets it, that he understands. After the United States Air Force completed its powerful strikes against Iran, Prime Minister Netanyahu held a press conference. This press conference was covered by Israeli and global media, and he made the following opening statement. My dear citizens of Israel, when I was first elected Prime Minister, I participated in the March of the Living at Auschwitz. While standing at Auschwitz, I had this powerful urge to wrap myself in a talit. I just had this feeling I need to be surrounded by the talit, by the prayer shawl. I put the prayer shawl on and I yelled out, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. 10 days ago, says the Prime Minister, just a few hours before the launch of this historic operation against the evil regime in Iran, I visited the Western Wall. And again, I had this powerful urge to put on a talit, to put on a prayer shawl. You can see the pictures of the Prime Minister of Israel standing at the Western Wall wearing this talis as Israel's about to go to war. I prayed for the success of our heroic pilots, our excellent soldiers and commanders, for the security of our state and for the peace of our people. And today, 10 days later, I returned to the wall with my wife, and again I wrapped myself in a talit and a prayer shawl, and I offered a prayer of gratitude and a request for continued success. And then he said this, we witnessed tremendous courage from our fighters, from our citizens, a massive support from our allies, but there was also, he said, siyaita dishmaya. There was heavenly assistance by God. And for that I give thanks on behalf of generations of Jews who waited for the establishment of our state, who long for us to protect our future, and that's what we're doing. So a thank you to God. These are strange words, perhaps coming from a secular politician. To stand before the media of the world and say, I can tell you certainly that there was help from God. Because he knew better than anyone how much planning, how much ingenuity, how much bravery and daring went into this operation. He knew how much a role God had to have to play in every aspect of it. And so he felt compelled to express the nation's gratitude in that way. One of the strategists involved in planning Rising Lion explained afterwards that it was such a complex and intricate operation that it had to be executed to near perfection in order to succeed. Anything that would go wrong would trigger a domino effect of other things going wrong. It literally was a plan that needed perfection, and they were afraid because in war you never get to perfection. You get something, some glitch happens. Some airplane's engine doesn't go on. Something goes wrong. But what actually happened in Iran during those 12 days never happened before, where everything worked to perfection. Every single part of it. Every life lost is an entire world. And during those 12 days, we lost 29 precious souls. When Iran responded with their missiles into Israel, many of them were caught by the Iron Dome. Many of them missed their mark, but a few hit their marks, and we lost 29 citizens. But when the war was over, and the military strategists spoke, they said that they were asked by the government before, best case scenario, worst case scenario, on death toll. That's a cold question that every government has to ask before a mission takes place. They said, a miraculous scenario would mean that we lose 400 citizens. Miraculous. There's a possibility that we would lose about 5,000. Because those missiles, they hit, they take out a block. We lost 29. 29 is a big number still. 1 is a big number. But it wasn't anything close to the 400. Miracles. Miracles. It continued on August 28th. The Israeli Air Force carried out targeted airstrikes in the meeting of senior Houthi officials in Yemen. They continued to go. You're attacking us from Yemen, we're going after you. 12 of the top ministers, cabinet members were eliminated in that attack, including their prime minister. Israel saying to the world, enough is enough. And then the latest surge a few months ago in Gaza, where they said, that's it. We're going to after Hamas like we never did before. We're going into Gaza City. We're going into every single building that's there. And suddenly, Hamas is at the negotiating table. And suddenly our hostages are back. When Israel changed the psyche, when Israel said, we're going to go after you wherever you are, many have criticized Israel because it went into Qatar. But it's interesting that Qatar only pressured Hamas to give up the hostages after Israel went into Qatar. Because Israel is sending a message there too. None of you are going to be safe if our hostages aren't returned. Now I know there's very different theories as to what changed in that period in 2024 where Israel suddenly took on a whole new posture. And every military person has a different theory. But I believe it was because we finally realized that if we stand strong and we realize that there is a God and that God will battle for us, and we undo the mistakes of the spies that I started with, and we realize that yes, it's within nature, and yes, we're going to use Air Force planes, and yes, we're going to use tanks, and we're going to use everything we have, and we're going to use an Iron Dome, and God will perform the miracles through them for us. And when we realize this, we realize that we become a living miracle. The living miracles happen through us, to us, if we connect ourselves to these miracles. As I mentioned when I started, I'm going to do this over 2 weeks. Next week, what I want to do is I'm going to come back and bring the miracles into our own lives. What does that mean for us? I explained to you about Israel. What does it mean in our own lives? How do we bring miracles into our own lives? For that, you're going to have to come back next Wednesday at 12:30. Those